yeah, thanks for coming down. Really appreciate you coming to see us. Today is really, as it says up there, a very light, high-level discussion about succession planning, okay? I'm 20 years into this job. If I told you everything that's in my head, you'd be asleep, and we'll be here for days. So, you know, it is meant to be very much, but then the plan is, as you'll notice, this is a theme of seminars on succession. It's looking about how business turns around and that point of succession and how we're going to plan for it. So you got me, unfortunately, corporate lawyer. Been doing this for 20 years, as I say. Going to talk about things to think about beforehand, and then what does the transaction look like. Surprising how many people don't have a clue what a share sale is and how it works and what it means to you. Laura's then going to talk about what happens afterwards. And, you know, it's all really good thinking about, I'm going to sell my company, but I don't want to pay tax. But then what you do is you have a really tax efficient scheme, you sell your company, get all this cash, and then you're sitting on cash, which is useless for tax. So Laura's going to talk about how you plan that afterwards, reinvestment, planning, trusts, etc. Why Myerson? Well, look, you know, we've been around as a firm for over 40 years. I've been at the firm nearly 10 years. We are started from an eggshell of a corporate lawyer. So Neil Myerson was a corporate lawyer in City Centre, decided, pretty much like me, couldn't do City Centre anymore, wants to come to Altrincham, start business here. We are now 150 members of staff, 25 partners, and still growing 15, 16% per annum. We are a full service law firm. We don't do PI, we don't do crime. Everything else, we've got it. So if you're looking to do your transaction, talking about planning for it and doing afterwards, that's why we exist. Over the years, we've bolted on different parts of the business in order to cover those areas off. So we have a family team to deal with owner managed businesses, purely going through divorces, settlements and everything like that, to deal with those issues, to give you guys as owners everything you need. We are very much OMB, SME based. We do bigger deals, we have larger clients, but our local business, our bread and butter is that 3, 5, 10, 20 million pound transactions. Not only do we have the service lines, corporate, employment, litigation, real estate, etc. We specialise in certain sectors. We have a really big emphasis on technology. So our commercial team do lots of software contracts. We've got clients here who know all about that. But as well as that, we have a private wealth team. And the private wealth team is split very much as you have here, a corporate lawyer, as well as private client. So the idea being to give that full service and touching base all the way through. Also to mention agri, hospitality, leisure and retail as other sectors that we specialise in. So, the session today, I thought about this 2 years ago, Bicky, but last year was so busy dealing with people's succession, we just didn't get this off the ground. And the idea is, this is one of many sessions. As I said, this is just a taster. You get to decide off the back of this what you want to hear about next. So I want to talk about pre-exit, exit, and what's afterwards. But you guys may say, well, that's all good, but I need some tax advice. So we might get our friends from Forbes Dawson, who are here in the room, to do something with us and talk about what do you need to think about with regards to tax advice. Inheritance tax planning, we're all over that. So sorry guys, you can't have that. But capital gains tax, corporation tax, all the other bits and pieces you want to think about leading up to it, we can put that on, or we may be getting some IFAs to talk about what do you want to do afterwards, because that is really complex. So in the feedback form, you're going to get there's some options what do you want to hear about next, but don't just tick a box. If you've got ideas, chuck it in there and we'll listen and we'll see what comes up next. We're going to spend about 15 minutes on each area, pre-exit, types of exit, post-exit, and then we'll give you a chance to ask some questions. But please ask questions. If you're online, Cam's going to shout out and tell me whatever it is. If you're in the room, if you've got something you ask, interrupt me. I'm happy with that, yeah? But if you want to save it or you want to discuss it with me or one of the team afterwards, then we're around. So, slide 1, into the nuts of it. I was doing my preparation for this yesterday. I looked at the slide and I was like, it's wrong. I've missed something off this, which is really, really important. And I thought, I'll ask you guys if you can work out what it is before, instead of fixing it. I've been told in a leadership thing, don't fix everything. Get them to do it for you. What's missing? Before you can start any of this stuff, what do you need to know? How much? What's the price? What are you selling for? If you don't know what you're selling for, how can you prepare the next step? Because number one is, if you've got a figure in your head, which is massive, yeah, your company's worth this, is that going to say you can do an MBO? Are you going to get the management team to go in and put all their houses up for remortgage in order to fund it? And if you are, do you have the right people in the management team to do it? Or does it mean that you have to go to market? Do you need to go out to the big market and find someone bigger than you who's going to afford to have his reserves to pay that amount of cash? It then dictates the timetable. If it's an MBO and you haven't got a management team, you need to go find a management team. You're not doing this in 1 or 2 years. This could be 5, 6, 7 years. So unless you know the price, you can't think about the rest of it. And as I tell everyone that comes to see me, you're planning now, you start at the end, at the completion, and work backwards. And that price is 2 sides to it. What is the company worth? Okay, you're a tech business, you could have million-term EBITDA, but it'll have a 10 times multiple on that. So you're looking at £10 million, maybe 15, who knows? But more so, what do you need? What do you need to sell for? If you're looking to sell, are you now retiring? So speak to IFA, they'll plan it for you, tell you exactly how much income you need until the end of your days. So that's going to be a big part of it. Or is it not important? Are you going to reinvest that, as we'll talk about later, and trying to, what's the next business? Turn it into the next big business. Sell that, do it again, do it again, do it again. Wish I had. So price is the most important thing to be thinking about now. So talk to people, go get your valuation done, speak to accountants, maybe your accountant, someone else who knows what they're doing, get the accountancy, do the valuation, and you start from there. Talking to people at the moment, and they're just told them exactly the same thing. Go away, let's work it out, and then we can sort out what we're going to do next. Then it comes to planning, timetable. So I've kind of mentioned it. This is a really, really rough timetable, okay? I made this up yesterday. Not all deals work like this. This is just a typical, let's say, trade sale, vendor initiated. When I want to say vendor initiated, you guys have sat there and gone, I want to sell. There are other deals that you'll all know about that just someone picks up the phone to you and says, I want to buy your business, I will pay you X, okay? And then the deal starts. And that is probably around about the 6-9 month point. Those deals sometimes work. But if you haven't done all the stuff beforehand and the pre-prep and the planning, most of those deals will fall over. They'll either come in too high priced, they find something wrong with the accounts or something else with contracts, which is common, I'll come onto it, and it will just disappear. So what we want to kind of do is just make sure that throughout, and I was saying to James earlier, you are planning for that call to come in. You start that planning now, and that is all part of the business all the way through what's going to happen. Because the most important thing is, you may run your business in a certain way, which is fine. It may be a lifestyle business, you may be a sole shareholder, you take all the money out, that's great, right? But when you do want to sell, it's not the regulators or those guys are looking at your business. It's lawyers like me looking at this going, those contracts of employment don't add up. He's only got T's and C's. He's got no long-term commercial agreements in place. Where's the restrictive covenants? Why has he not done his statutory books? Why has he left them with the accountant? The accountant's lost them. All these issues that come up will make a deal fall over. So when you're thinking about an exit and thinking and how your corporate governance, how you run your business, don't think about what you need to do for the business and making money. Think about the lawyers are going to pour over this at the end. We're really nasty. We're looking for the worst things out there. So timetable, let's say, if you are talking about if you get the offer, you can't ignore, we see them, sometimes they say they work, they're not. If not, if you're going to initiate this transaction as the owners of the business, what do you need to start thinking about and when? And it depends on the deal. I already mentioned it, who you're selling to. All right, so this is a really rough example of you're going to sell to a third party in the trade, they're going to come in and do everything. So I reckon around about 2 years beforehand, minimum. Start working out your valuation. How much is it worth? Because once you know how much it's worth, you know how much you're going to sell for. And you know who you're going to see to buy it. Tax advice then. That's the next one. We don't do tax advice. We do some inheritance tax advice. We have enough information in order to point in the right direction, but you need to get tax advice in relation to A, what's the company doing, but B, your personal tax position. If I sell, how much is it going to cost me in tax? How do I minimize that and make the transaction as efficient as possible? And that could be looking to move some shares around early. It may be looking to move them into family names, move stuff around. There's pros and cons to all of it. Then around about 18 months, have you got the right people in the right place? When you exit, are you... Most of the time, yeah, you are going to fully exit. So if you haven't got the right people doing the job you do day to day, whether it's a finance role, a sales role, just generally, people role, who's going to do it? The buyer might have someone to take in and do that, but maybe they don't. So you really got to think about you've got the right people in the right place, which is always important. Also, you've got to look at incentivization, share options, bonuses. How are you going to keep them going to build the business for the next 18 months in order to get that big figure that you really want? Seller due diligence. This is really, really important. It's overlooked. It's expensive. People don't, if you haven't got a deal lined up, why spend loads of money on professional fees if there's no payout at the end? But it really does pay to make this investment early on and start having a look under the bonnet and seeing what's right with the business and what's wrong and start fixing it. Get it ready for sale. T-minus 12 months, appoint your advisors. Talking to John before, corporate finance. If you are looking to go to market, you need to get these guys on board. It could take, what do you say, John, 3, 6, 9 months to find someone to get there in the end. So, sooner the better, but once you've got the buyer, you need to be ready to sell because they ain't hanging around. So you negotiate the commercial terms and deal with all the points there. If you need to implement pre-completion tax advice, tax planning, reorganization structures, that's the time now at 12 months. You don't want to be doing this at the last minute. You'll have so much going on trying to run the business, trying to get the sale done, going on holiday because you're going to celebrate, all the things that people are doing when they're trying to exit the business. You don't want too many advisors doing different things because, as I said, lawyers are poring over everything. About 9 months beforehand, are the commercial terms right? Heads of terms are going to be discussed. We're going to go through in a bit what goes into heads of terms, what's the structure of the deal, how much you're getting paid, when you're going to get paid, how much you've got to roll over, etc. 6 months, that's where we get involved normally around about 6 months. So all of this planning, all of that, lawyers get here. It's a nightmare because we haven't done all the stuff beforehand. We haven't seen all of that. We're now trying to work out the bits and pieces. So we have a very small window of where we get involved. Hence why I've asked you to come here so I can teach you about this stuff. Financial due diligence, 3-4 months beforehand, normally last minute. If you haven't tidied everything up beforehand, this is where the things come out of the woodwork. Legal start 2-3 months beforehand. 6 to 8 weeks we normally say. Best case. Could be worse. Depends on the transaction. And then finally you complete. There's a lot to do. And that's just before. Wait till you get to the bit afterwards. But as I said, it really depends on what you're doing. 2 years for an MBO, nowhere near it. Not a chance. EOTs, again, if you haven't got a management team that can take over when you step out or step back, you haven't recruited them, you haven't got the right people. How do you know you've got the right people? You may recruit someone, think they're amazing, a year down the line, they bugger off. Or they haven't got the same values as you, or they don't agree with the firm's culture, the business culture. You need to really bed them in, and it takes a period of time. Also, you want to get motivated. So, it really depends on what you're doing, hence why the price question is so important at the beginning. Who are you selling to? Tax, can't advise on it, we've already kind of mentioned. What have I got there? So on tax, we'll help you, we'll put it in the right direction, but as I said, it's got to be tax efficient. Things to think about: capital gains tax, BADR. Are you going to get your entrepreneur relief, as it used to be called? You're going to get 10%. If it's an EOT, you can forget about it because there's no capital gains tax on EOTs. It's really attractive. We'll mention them in a bit. But is it the right thing? Post-tax advice, even more important. As I said, once you've converted everything to cash, if you pop your clogs, all of that is going to 40% inheritance tax. So you need to turn that cash into something else very quickly after the deal. Otherwise, you're going to get in trouble. Restructuring, I mentioned before. Again, tax-led. If there's too much cash in the business, How many businesses out there don't pay dividends out because they don't want to pay 40% tax on divvy? They'll roll it out, they get the cash out in some other way. And they sit there with millions of pounds of cash sitting on the accounts. Well, there's your BADR out the window, because if you've got too much cash in there for investment purposes, I'm right about this guy over there, you're not going to get your BADR, you're paying 20% tax. Can we get the cash out? It's not going to happen overnight. You need to start planning to do that as well. Debt, most deals we see, completion accounts in there, debt-free, cash-free, you've got directors' loans, you're going to have to pay them back. You're going to have to pay them back. You know, buyers don't necessarily want to see that, and it cuts into your price. So another COVID loans are another big problem. Sound great at the time. Everyone's got COVID loans. Can't do a deal. They have to be repaid. So they're going to have to come from somewhere. Buyer doesn't want to pay for it. So look at the debt in there. Can you manage it? Can you start clearing it? Property, another big issue. Heard a few big clients, lots of retail sector, lots of property, big head office. Start looking at the trades. The property is a massive property investment business, really. It's not a trading business. So again, your BADR is probably at risk. You've got a problem. Does the buyer even want to buy the property? Most buyers don't. Why are you going to spend £20 million on property for a 5 million trading business? So you may need to take the property out. Do we take the property out and put it in pension? Maybe. Tax efficient, works. We'll mention that in a bit. Or do we need to restructure? Do we need to demerge? So many demergers going on at the moment. Everyone preparing for an exit. Don't know why. It must be something to do with government. So there are loads of demergers, but they take months. They take planning. You need to get tax clearance. You need to get it all done right. So that thinking needs to be thought about. Do you have minority or silent shareholders in the business? They started off early on. You gave some shares to do some work, but they've done nothing since. Or they cash rolled it to start off with. What are you going to do with them? Are you going to wait for the heads of terms of the land to say, we're going to pay you 10 million quid, and you've got to give him his 10% of 10 million quid? Hell no. He's done nothing for it. Why should he earn it? Do you need to start looking at these guys and trying to come to terms with them now to say, look, all's good, but you're not doing anything now. Here's your money back, plus a return. Can we move on? Bloody hell, 20 minutes in. Staff. Mentioned it before. Staff really, really, really important. Okay, if you haven't got the right people, you're not going to sell. The Future Man team are going to be the success of the business, whether it's an MBO, an EOT, a sale to third party. The people that are doing the sales and driving the business now need to be there afterwards. So you need to make sure they're motivated, not just on the run up beforehand. So we want to grow the business. You're going to be distracted selling the thing. They need to be running it. If they're running it, they need to be motivated to do it. So cash bonuses for performance, share option schemes, EMI, love them. We do loads of EMI schemes. You give them nothing up front. You tell them that they have to pay 80 to 90% discount on the value of the shares, and you get the shares 5 minutes beforehand, you get a load of cash. They're really motivated, but they're not in the way. They're not a minority shareholder. They've just got a right to a share in the future. You don't have to worry about them. There's no voting. There's no dividends to pay them. It only happens at the end. And you get a corporation tax kick at the end of it, which goes into your sale price. Win-win. Talk to me about EMIs after. Once they're in, and depending on the structure, are they going to be motivated? If it's an MBO or an EOT, there's going to be some debt. The vendors are going to leave some skin in the game. They're going to get paid afterwards. Are they going to be motivated after the deal's done to basically pay you out first, as opposed to pay themselves? So the payment terms structure, how much, the price again, has to be considered into this factor as to, it's no point them working for 10 years paying you out when they're taking still the same salary they were taking before. They want what you were earning. They want to see the money. And the problem then is, when they look to exit 10, 20 years, have they earned enough money in their time to get the sale? And then who's buying from them? There may not be the possibility of the MBO because the business may have grown tenfold by then. So you really got to plan not just for this succession, the next succession. Mentioned this. Future Man team, motivated, done. EMI schemes mentioned. Really, really useful tool. Really helpful. Tax advantages. Everything else there. Things to think about as well. Funding. Do you need to speak to the bank? If you are looking to fund this through an MBO, you're going to want some cash out on day one. Are you going to go to your bank to say, can we start borrowing money in order to pay us out, and then the rest of it's going to come out of future profits? How early do you need to start thinking about bank lending? It's not cheap. Most people these days selling will put their own money on the line. because interest rates are different. So they'll say, well, okay, look, I'll take some cash out, but you can pay me over 10 years at a lower rate of interest, but then it's your risk. Seller due diligence, really, 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 really important thing. It's skimmed a lot. You want to do financial due diligence beforehand. John, we were talking about before on James even, we were talking before about going to audited accounts now, even though you don't need to. Really important to start getting to, your buyer may be audited. So when you do that deal on completion, your accounting policies are all going to change and be flipped to an audited thing. What holes are in there? We're looking at one guy at the minute, and this is a massive issue on all transactions we're looking to purchase. He's got £500,000–600,000 of R&D tax relief in his accounts. There's no chance that exists. So there's going to be a big hole in the accounts when we apply the audit rules to this. So have you done the financial due diligence? Is it financially ready to sell? Are the accounts added up? In all warranty claims that are made, 90% are based on the accounts. There's a hole in the accounts. So the accounts must be poured over. Legal. We have so many deals hang up at the very last minute because we're still waiting for basic fundamental legal things. Are the stat books written up and up to date? No, they never are. They're lost. They're with the accountant. They moved that from that accountant 5 years ago. We don't know where they are. We have to reconstitute them. It's a simple thing, but you have to do it. If you haven't got the stat books of the company, you can't sell it. They are who owns the company. Are your T's and C's in place? So many businesses, oh yeah, I'm a sales business, IT especially, they have no long-term contracts in place. They have T's and C's. Really? You're looking for someone to buy on a multiple basis and you've got no long-term contracts? Come see us. Let's look at your contracts, look at the commercial terms, start drafting them early now, get all your customers onto a standard contract on a 12-month rolling basis. Are your employment terms right? What if everyone's just going to do one on completion? Have you got restrictive covenants in place? Have you got notice periods at work? Are the contracts compliant? All of these things are what the lawyer's going to look at as part of the deal. So why not start looking at it now, get that packaged up and ready? We will start the deal, and I'll come into the nuts and bolts of it very shortly, very quickly as well. Due diligence, we're going to be pouring over all the information of the business. We're going to look at every single issue and we're going to flag this to our client or the buyer on the sell side and say, look, this is an issue. It's going to affect your price. So why ruin the price by putting a bit of effort in beforehand? Commercial is another point there. So I'm going to have to really go through this quickly, otherwise we're going to run out of time. There's a lot to talk about. But types of exit. A standard share deal is kind of where I'm going to start with, and I'm going to give you a couple of differences if it's PE, management buyout, and EOTs, and I'll give you some of the key reasons why they differ from a standard share sale. But a typical share sale, right, is all about risk, okay? Normal deal, buyer comes along, he's going to pay you, let's say, £10 million cash on day one for all your shares on day one. Buyer is taking all the risk, 10 million quid, right? It's not like going to the supermarket, looking at a can of beans and going, oh yeah, ingredients, and know exactly what you've got on the label. You've got to do your due diligence. You've got to find out, is the company worth 10 million quid? Where are the holes? Okay? So due diligence plays a big part. But from the seller's point of view, in order to balance out from the buyer's point of view of that risk, the buyer's going to turn around and you apply caveat emptor, want to carry out due diligence. Once he's done due diligence, he's going to want a load of statements called warranties. And warranties basically are post-completion price adjustment. So you say, I've complied with all laws. If you haven't, then afterwards they're going to come back and say, you didn't comply with this law, it's cost us X to make it compliant, please pay out £50,000. Okay, pension's always a big one for that one. So they're looking at adjusting the price afterwards. If it's a warranty, it's normally quite fair, it's low risk. If it's higher risk, they're going to want indemnity. And indemnity is, you've done this, and if this goes wrong, then I want not only my loss, but I want all my expenses on a pound for pound basis. So it could happen, right? Or you do the due diligence, you find out there's a £500,000 R&D tax claim in there, which is at high risk, and you say, I'm going to chip it because this is a problem, or I'm going to hold back that £500,000 quid. So it comes down to the structure and balancing everything else out. The most important thing for the seller is they want to sleep afterwards. They want to do the deal, walk away and make sure that their advisor's done the right job and they can carry on with their lives without having to think about it afterwards. Hence why due diligence, the warranty process, disclosure, we spend a lot of time on it. It's the most important part of the deal because we're just balancing that risk. That's all we're doing. How's it going to be paid? Is it all up front unlikely. There's some businesses out there that are going to pay everything up front, but you're going to get at least 50% of your cash up front if you're exiting. I wouldn't do a deal otherwise. They'll be deferred, so that'll be a loan, basically from the buyer, to say that we'll pay you back after 12, 18, 24 months. We'll pay you the rest of it, and that's normally for set-off purposes. If there's a problem, we want to set off some of that money. Is that loan going to be secured? We get loads of people coming to us heads of terms and say, right, so I've agreed a deal, it's £5 million, and £2.5 million of that is going to be unsecured and paid in 2 years' time. So, okay, how much is your house worth? £1 million. You got a mortgage on that? Yeah. So your house is mortgaged to the bank for £1 million or whatever the debt is, but you're happy to give someone £2.5 million without a mortgage on it. Why? And then they come back to it and say, well, the buyer's funded by a bank, and the bank goes first. Fine, let the bank go first, but don't not have security on £2.5 million. It's crazy. Why would you do that? So look at the debt. Is it deferred? Is it secured? Is there interest? If it's over 5 years, goddamn yeah, you want interest, especially nowadays. Make sure you've got interest in there. Think about these simple things. Earn-outs, popular, especially in tech sector. I've got one guy selling for 12 million. He's going to roll 6 million in, and he's going to do an earn-out for 3-5 years. He's too young to sell, basically. He will now do that. But the earn-out will potentially double that price. But that's based on future performance of the business. If your numbers aren't right now, how are you going to be confident to do that? Earn-outs are nice. They're nice to have. They're talked about, but they shouldn't be the deal. The completion price and what you're going to get on deferred should be the reason why you're signing. The earn-out is a nice have. And always be of that mind, because most earn-outs are chipped, or mainly because, and let's be fair, people selling the business don't want to work for other people. They own a business because they can't work for other people. So as soon as you go into someone else's business, especially run by with different cultures, I give these people 6 to 12 months. So earn-outs really are, it's a nice to have. Price adjustments, you won't get a decent deal unless there's a price adjustment in there. So completion accounts, lockbox, I can talk about that for ages, but basically what it's going to be is applying certain policies, looking for certain holes, and making sure that what they're paying for. So we've got a net asset value adjustment on the one deal at the moment. They want to see net asset value in there, 1.7 million quid. If not, for every pound below it, the price comes down. So we'll do accounts afterwards, as at the date, to see if that's correct. Lockbox is slightly different. We look at historic accounts. We say, these are the accounts. This is a number, and we haven't taken any money out of the business since then, so everything's fine. And to the extent any money does come out, then it's leakage, and you pay it back, and it comes off the price. Consideration shares mentioned before, rolling over your shares, so you reinvest your purchase price into the buyer, X million, you then become a shareholder in the buyer, you then get your flip side out when there's a further transaction later on. I mentioned risk, I'm not going to talk about the key documents. So that's a normal deal. That's what we see majority of the time, in my experience. Private equity is slightly different. Private equity is, well, private equity funds. They are funded by individuals with loads of cash who want to make a return on that money. Their job is to go find businesses, invest in them, get 300 to 500% return in a period of 5 years, and then get out. That's their purpose. So it's a different market for them. They're more risk averse. They're looking forwards as they look backwards because they want to see that return. And the share deal is the price, the consideration is completely different. So the price is normally a lot lower up front. As I was saying before, this PE deal I've got at the moment, it's 12 million quid, 6 million on completion, 6 million rolled into the buyer. They'll become a shareholder then in the buyer structure, and then it'll have a shareholders agreement, article association, and they will then become subject to investor terms. A lot of PE deals are debt funded. So the funds behind it loan the cash in as opposed to invest it. So they will want to first, they want security up front. It'll be a 5-year term. So you're not getting any cash out for 5 years. If you walk, you're not getting your cash out. You'll sit behind everyone. You'll be secured to the hilt behind everyone else. If you get security and interest, unlikely. It's a different deal, but it sounds awful. It's not. PE is lovely if you can get it. If you are the right mindset and you can get into there, you sell on day one, you de-risk. They're not buying 100% on day one. They can't. Most of these funds can't. They're not interested. If they do, you'll take a share later on in the group as a reinvestment. But you sell on day one, you de-risk. You put 5 million quid in your back pocket. You haven't got all your risk in the business. 5 years later, they've just turned this into a 3 to 5 times bigger business and they sell it. and you'll then sell again at 3 to 5 times more than you first sold. So if you can get in there and you can live with it, you'll make a load of money. And you may do that 2-3 times. But it's a big ask. Some people call private equity expensive lending. And it is to a certain extent, but there are the benefits of it. MBOs, everyone knows what MBO is. There's loads of different types of MBOs. I'm not going to go into them, but a straightforward management buyout, you're selling, you're leading the transaction. So it's very much a lighter deal. Your management team, if you've done your planning already, you probably sat on the beach for 6 months of the year. They know the financials, they know the operations, they know the risks, the liabilities, the assets, they know everything. You don't need to run the business anymore. They're ready to take it over. So when it comes to risk, they know everything already. You just got to get your cash out. So the deal's a lot simpler. The due diligence is shorter. There's less warranties, less problems for it. But you got to get the right people, and you got to fund it, and you got to potentially put your money at risk, because if they aren't motivated, they ain't going to pay you out. So MBOs are amazing, but you're looking at probably less upfront, bank lending, putting the company under some gearing in order to leveraging the assets to get to where you need to be. It's complicated. A lot more planning required. And then a quick mention, because I know what the time is, it's 1:30, EOTs. Employee ownership trusts, everyone heard of EOTs nowadays? I think was the stats someone gave me, 1,650 in the UK. I was trying to work out if John Lewis is an EOT, an actual proper EOT under the tax rules, but I don't think it is it? They predated it. I think they were even looking to come out actually. But that's the idea, is the owners run, the business is there and owned by the employees for the benefit of the employees. And effectively all it is a trust that buys the shares from the sellers. It's a really straightforward deal. It's like an MBO, but a lot more complicated because it's a tax-led structure. The government wanted to bring employee ownership to the UK. And how did they do it? They decided to come up with a load of tax rules, say you can do this, and if you do it, you don't pay capital gains tax. Yes! When these first hit the market, everyone sold it on a tax-led transaction. Come to us, we'll set you up an EOT, you won't pay tax on the sale. Those deals are now being scrutinised. HMRC are looking at them and potentially going back and taking away the capital gains tax relief because it was not set up for employee ownership. It was a way for a seller to put a massive valuation on their business, sell it, cripple the business, cripple the future management team, and walk away with a load of cash. That is not the purpose. We do not do our EOTs on that basis. If you want to do that, set up an MBO. Look at other structures. But it's not an employee ownership trust. It will fall over. You'll lose the capital gains tax and the revenue are going to walk all over it. So when we look at doing OTs, we are very, very focused on it has to be for the right reason. Does the culture of the firm, the business, mean that it's for the benefit of the employees? Professional businesses, it's perfect for, because it's employee run pretty much anyway. The business is based on the people that are working in it. Does it meet the culture? Would an independent sale somewhere else ruin that business? See it a lot. So the idea is that EOTs are there, they have a really good purpose. You need to get the employment team, all employees on board because there's benefit to them. You need to get the management team, seriously, you need to get the management team sold into this because it's a real difficult ask. And if they're not into it, there's no deal. Once you become an EOT, you're not looking to sell to a third party after that. It will need to maintain its independence. So if this is just a step to then selling to a big boy later on, it's not going to work. It's about maintaining the independence of the firm in the long term. Benefits, you don't have to leave. You can start planning and doing your OT a lot earlier than your succession plan may decide because you don't have to sell 100% to the OT. A lot of the businesses do a 50% sale. You have to do a majority stake, has to be 50.1%, otherwise you don't get the tax clearance. It won't be an OT. If you do that, you can then decide, okay, I'm going to start winding this down for 5 years. You put the funding in place, it's a 5-year exit, you borrow money from the bank, you get some cash out, you de-risk up front, and then you can slowly wind the business down and put your management team in place over that 5 years. Work with them to do the handover and then slowly retire out the business. It's flexible. But you have to be flexible with your money. If the if the business isn't doing well afterwards, then you're not going to get your cash out. So you've got to be prepared to get your cash out as and when the company's got the money. But from everything we've seen about EOTs, as soon as they go into employee ownership, everyone's really excited, they own the business, they're motivated for their own benefit, and therefore most businesses, I think it's about 15% growth as soon as EOT, they're reporting at the moment. Talked about maintaining existing values. Tax is really important, but it shouldn't be, what does he say, don't let the tax tail wag the dog. Let that, it's important, it's a decent amount of cash and saving for the capital gains tax, and employees get 3,600 income tax free bonus per annum. It's not to be sniffed at, that's a really good holiday, tax free. Disadvantages, really strict on tax, it's not 100%. If you don't do 100% exit, you do the 50%. You got a management team that are looking to get their money out of the business, but they've also got half of them thinking they need to be looking after the best interests of the employees. There's a purposeful conflict here. If the management team say, or the sellers say, I want this money out this month, but you need to reinvest it because you've got to recruit people, you're going to have a problem. So the OT must be mainly independent. It must be separated from them. You need to have strict shareholders agreement and regulations around how you manage that going forwards. And really, a lot of the time when we see sellers suggest a 50% point, for more than a minority sale, basically, we steer them in the direction of a non-EOT structure. Similar, there's a trust in there for the benefit, but it's not got the tax benefits because it just doesn't fit. And I think I'm going to shut up now and I'm going to let Laura speak. Yeah, I'm done. Please. Way over.
Just perhaps move this to create a bit of room. Okay. Morning, everybody. Morning. So I'm Laura Willis. I'm a Senior Associate Solicitor in the Wills, Trust and Probate team. We work really closely with Scott's team because a lot of our clients are business owning clients. So we advise on, as I say, wills, trust, probate, but also on estate planning, tax planning, and looking at how we can pass your wealth on in a tax efficient way and in an appropriate way to your family members as well. So I'm going to give a bit of an overview of some of the options and considerations to start thinking about. Like Scott, it's planning well before the exit and making sure that you've got things in place before you actually exit the business. We are going to go into a lot more detail in some of these areas in future seminars, and you can give us feedback at the end about any areas that you would like more information on as well. So pre-exit, you want to make sure that you have got your wills up to date and in place, mainly because you want to make sure that you are maximising business property relief. So business property relief is a really useful tax relief that applies to your shares, your business assets, because if they meet the criteria, then they'll be fully relieved from inheritance tax on death. So it's important to make sure that you realise this and that your wills are up to date, because if you have fairly simple wills leaving everything outright to husband, wife, civil partner, then although your estate passing those business assets on the first death will be free from inheritance tax under the spouse exemption, you've wasted the opportunity to claim business property relief, and that could result in there being a large tax liability on the second death. And the reason for that is if, as I say, spouse on the first death leaves everything to surviving spouse, it'll be covered by the spouse exemption. You can't claim the BPR on the first death. And then if surviving spouse goes on to sell the business, they've converted that BPR qualifying asset into a lump sum of cash that's going to form part of their estate on the second death and be subject to inheritance tax. So if you sell the business for £2 million, you've suddenly got an £800,000 tax liability that you didn't have before. So we would be saying, make sure your wills are up to date, and on the first death, you are leaving your BPR assets into a discretionary trust in your will on the first death. Because on the first death, your estate will still be tax-free. It'll be covered by the spouse exemption and BPR on those assets passing into the trust. But the difference is it'll be the trust selling the business after the first death. The trust will then hold the proceeds of sale. It can be distributed to spouse if they need the money, but more likely probably held for children and future generations to pass on to them in a tax-efficient way. But the main point is that money will be ring-fenced from surviving spouse's estate, so it won't form part of their estate for tax purposes on the second death. So you go from that potential £800,000 tax liability to potentially nothing. So it's important to have the wills up to date. And we work with Scott's team to look at shareholders agreements, cross-option agreements to make sure that everything will work when we then structure your wills in that way. It's also important to think about lasting powers of attorney. I think most people are familiar with them now. They are legal documents that allow you to appoint somebody to make decisions on your behalf about your finances and your welfare if you lose capacity. But I think not a lot of people realise that you can have separate lasting powers of attorney for your business affairs. And that can be useful because if you think for your personal finances, you might think, I want to have my spouse and all my children equally involved in making decisions about my personal finances. But it might not be appropriate to have all those people making decisions about your business assets and your business decisions. You might just want to have the one child who's already involved in the business. So that kind of creates a smooth transition if you do lose capacity. So we can help draft those documents so you've got the separate LPAs for your personal affairs, your financial business affairs. And again, working with Scott's team to look at the articles and the other company documentation to make sure that the documents we draft are in line with those company documents. So that's sort of some pre-exit things to think about. Post-exit, you're at a point after the exit where hopefully, you've sold the business, you've got a large lump sum of cash now sitting in your bank account, which is great. But as Scott mentioned, you've gone from BPR qualifying asset to a large lump sum of cash that is going to, incur a tax liability if something happens. So the sooner you start planning, the better. And that's where we can help. So again, it's looking at making sure your wills are up to date, because although you are thinking about tax planning, it's also thinking about how you sensibly pass this money down the generations. Because if you suddenly got, £5 million sitting in the bank, leaving that to certain family members might create issues of its own. So for example, if you think you've got simple wills at this point, leaving everything outright to each other, fine. But if you leave that large lump sum of cash to surviving spouse or civil partner, is there a chance of remarriage? Is there a chance of them changing their will? Perhaps if there are family fallouts, might they require care in the future? Is this already a second or third marriage and there are children from previous relationships? So with these sorts of scenarios, we'd be talking to you about incorporating some asset protection in your wills to kind of ring fence your share of the assets. It would still be available for surviving spouse or civil partner if they need it, but it'll definitely then be guaranteed for your chosen beneficiaries on the second death, regardless of what sort of happens between the first and the second death. Also, you want to be thinking about leaving large lump sums of money to children, grandchildren, and whether it would be appropriate to leave potentially millions of pounds outright to them. So if you have, minors, young adult children, what could the potential risks be of leaving millions of pounds? If they've lost both of their parents and then they're inheriting that much money outright, think of the potential risks that could come with that. If perhaps your children are older, they might be going through divorce or bankruptcy, and you kind of don't want that money to be swallowed up in those proceedings. There might be other vulnerabilities, drug abuse or alcohol issues, other external sort of undue influences. They might be entitled to means tested benefits now or maybe at some point in the future, so receiving that large lump sum of money would affect those benefits. And your children might already have a tax liability of their own. If they've been involved in the business and have also extracted a lump sum of cash after the sale, then if you're going to leave millions more to them, it's going to be taxing your estate and then taxing their estate again. So for all of these sorts of reasons, we would be talking to you about a discretionary trust in your will on the second death and thinking about the benefits of that. A discretionary trust includes a list of potential beneficiaries, so no one person has an automatic right to the money, and it's up to the trustees to decide when and how to distribute that money after the death in the most tax efficient way and in a sensible way as well, bearing in mind all of those potential risks or vulnerabilities that I've just mentioned. So thinking more about the tax, obviously you've got this lump sum of cash that's going to be subject to inheritance tax, and you're going to be quite keen to try and mitigate your overall tax liability. The best way to do that is to reduce the overall value of your estate. And you can do that by spending the money. So travelling, booking your holidays, fine. But you can also do that by gifting it. So gifting it to your family members or to charities or whoever. But the sooner you start doing this, the better, because you've got to survive the 7 years for the value of that gift to drop out of your estate for tax purposes. So this is why it's really important to sort of start thinking about this well before the exit and kind of get your head around the idea of gifting and how that might look. Because you can, of course, gift outright. You can give, your children large lump sums of money, survive the 7 years and it'll drop out of your estate. But maybe think about the same sorts of risks that I've just mentioned in terms of gifting outright. If you're going to give them £1 million, are they going to squander that money? Is it going to get swallowed up in certain proceedings? So you might not want to gift outright the large lump sums that you're trying to get out of your estate. So what you can do as an alternative, you can gift to a family trust, and we can of course help set that up and advise you about that. This would be a lifetime trust, so you would be able to retain some control in terms of deciding how and when it's then passed on to them via the trust. I suppose the downside to a trust is that you are limited to gifting your available nil rate band, which is up to £325,000 per person. What our clients often do is, as a couple, they will gift £650,000 to a trust and then repeat that process every 7 years. So that's why it's really important to start thinking about this sooner rather than later, because the more times you can gift into one of those trusts, the more you're going to be able to reduce the value of your estate for tax purposes. Family investment companies. So an area that I think we're going to cover in a lot more detail in a future seminar, but we advise lots of our clients and help implement these post-exit, and it crosses over again with Scott's team. So clients really like these sorts of structures because of the familiarity of a company structure and the flexibility that it can offer in terms of the shares that you can issue to various family members. So the idea is that post-exit you've got this lump sum of cash that you want to invest, but obviously investing it in property or other investments, any growth in those investments is going to increase your own personal tax liability. So we can structure the family investment company in a way that it's the company making the investment, and then any growth is outside of your estate for tax purposes. And again, it can be really flexible because you can issue those shares to yourself, to children, or into a trust so that you can retain some control in terms of how those shares are later distributed. So as I say, we'll be spending a bit more time sort of talking about family investment companies at a future seminar. But the idea would be that on that you would get the holistic tax advice from a tax advisor to begin with, and then we would help implement that. If there's going to be a trust involved, we will get involved, and obviously Scott's team would deal with incorporating the company and issuing the shares. And then I think just the final point to be thinking about, which again is sort of a pre-exit but rolls into post-exit planning as well, is making sure you've got the right advisors in place and you've got a really good relationship with them. So obviously, your accountants, solicitors, financial advisors, and tax advisors. But you might not really have dealt with financial advisors before. If all of your assets have been the business, suddenly now you've got this large lump sum of cash and you're going to need some guidance in terms of how you then go about investing that. So we would say it's really important to kind of establish that relationship with a financial advisor well before you are ready to invest, so that you trust them, you know how they work, you've had plenty of opportunities to discuss how it is going to be invested. And they'll be able to talk about different strategies, so looking at how much you can afford to give away, forecasting the income that you need, and then planning how and when you do gift. They'll look at investment options, so looking at the AIM market, and if that's something you want to invest in to secure some BPR in your estate, and maximising the pensions and looking at sort of SIP wrappers as well to be as tax efficient as possible. So yeah, it's making sure that you've got those relationships in place well before the sale so that you feel ready to kind of part ways with that money and invest it in accordance with their plan really and guidance. And again, at Myerson, we work with a panel of IFAs and accountants and tax advisors, so we would always be able to help match you up with the right people to guide you through that whole process. So I think that's everything that I was going to touch on today. I know it is a bit of an overview, but as I say, we will be picking up on a lot of these points in future seminars. As part of the packs, we have got the will questionnaires that are tailored towards business clients, and I think we'll also be sending that out by email with the slides. So if you do want help and you want to start a conversation about how we can help you, a really good thing to do is have a look through that questionnaire, send it across to us, and then we can start a conversation about how we can help. I think that's everything from me. Any questions, and I think feedback in terms of future seminars?
Yeah. Any burning questions for you guys?
I got one for Scott, one for Laura. So, the timetable, I think it was 18 months. You need to do the seller due diligence. Could you argue that should be done even before you got a price in mind?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's one of those things, as I said before, cycle of a business, people start off, they've got an idea, they go to the back bedroom, they start the business off, and then all they're thinking is sell, sell, sell. And then they start having the issue of money and everything else like that, and governance, rules, law, all of that stuff. If you've started in that kind of background, it's not thought about. It's something that people need to be educated at an earlier stage to get those procedures absolutely spot on. And to kind of understand that, okay, yes, you're running this as a lifestyle business, you're making a load of cash, you're spending it, it's all good. But if it's not on paper any good, then you're never going to sell. So many of these businesses we see, they just fall over. The deals fall over because it just doesn't add up. So yeah, it's about speaking to advisors all the way through, making sure it's done right, have the right accountants. Always important to have the right accountants from the very beginning. And like all businesses, you start off, we were talking about earlier, you start off and you don't need KPMG to do your accounts. You'll need a local bookkeeper. But then a year or two in, you'll need someone to give a bit of tax advice and do your tax returns. And like all professionals, you will outgrow the people you're with. And those people that don't outgrow their professional advisors find themselves in a lot of mess later on because they haven't had the proper advice. And they're at a stage where you kind of go, well, I've got to sell my business. He hasn't got a clue what he's doing. You can do my property, I can sell my house, but you can't sell a company. So it's making sure that you have that education and that awareness of saying, well, just because it's right now doesn't mean it's always going to be right. But yeah, that's why we're trying to run these kind of seminars to get that message across.
And Laura, you mentioned two types of trust, a discretionary trust and a family trust. Are those separate things?
Sorry, no. So a discretionary trust would usually have a list of potential beneficiaries that would include a wide class of family members, so children, grandchildren, possibly spouses as well of those individuals. So that's often referred to as a family trust. So I did also mention a life interest trust, which is slightly different to the discretionary trust, and that would be where you're leaving the right to income to the surviving spouse, but that's what creates a protection for passing it on to your chosen beneficiaries on the second death. So they were the two sorts of trusts that I think I mentioned.
650,000 in every 7 years, so that's your nil rate band.
Times two, couple, yeah.
And you said wait 7 years before doing it again. Can you not straddle it, or do you have to wait the full 7 years to put the other slug in? Or could you start the clock after you put it in first and then you put it in 3 years later?
So when you are gifting to trust, if you exceed your available nil rate band, then you are going to incur an immediate tax charge. So that's why we would say every 7 years it resets. Yep.
Anyone else?
What's the cost comparables for different types of exits when it comes to legal fees?
Depends on your advisor. If you get a good one, they're expensive. If you get a bad one, it'll cost you more later on. It's difficult. It's impossible to tell. It depends on the type of deal. If it's, to be fair, PE deals normally are more expensive because they want 2 lots of warranties, as I already mentioned. You'll get a share sale, see everything going backwards, but then from the investment point of view, they want to see forwards. So there's that bit there. You then got to look at advising on what does the future look for you. And when you start looking at good lever, bad lever stuff, when you go into a PE, to that kind of structure, it kind of gets messy, and there's a lot more from our point of view training and educating the seller to say, look, this is where you are, you did it all yourself, which is fine, but now you need to go in here and there's rules. And if you do this, which is in your control, this is going to happen to you. So there's a lot more educating in that and going through and hand-holding in the process. EOTs, relatively cheap from a legal point of view, more on tax clearance, a lot more planning time and bank costs because of the funding there, same with the MBOs. So there are, you've got to look at, whenever you're looking to exit, you need to have some costs in mind as a lump sum. But most PE deals, both sides, decent sized deal, they probably have £500,000 worth of costs across the entire suite for a transaction of say 3-5 million plus minimum, £500,000 costs. But that's your accountancy, it's your tax advice, it's high level tax advice for the PE fund, as well as everything else. So it's not cheap, and don't pretend to do it on a shoestring, because whatever you save up front will bite you in the bum later. Morgan.
Scott, you mentioned partial exit with private equity lending. One, how common is that? And you kind of mentioned about your shares kind of get, I think you might have said transferred or bought into the...
Reinvest.
Reinvested, was the right word. How common is that? And presumably that's like a second bite of the cherry.
Yeah, so you get a second bite of the cherry. So private equity is...
But you're obviously giving up part of your value, or what is your cash?
Private equity will never always buy 100% because they're not running your business. They're a private equity fund. They're there to look after their funds and return value to them. They're not widget makers. So they'll come in, they want the management team to stay on. So it's really important. So the sellers may 100% exit, but you need to have a senior management team that's going to follow on behind them to run it. The other thing is most large funds have tax rules, VCTs as well. They're kind of more than 50%, can they? If they have more than 50%, then they don't get tax advantages, which means that investors don't get the tax advantages and returns they get. So 50% is normally the limit. There are exceptions to the rule where it's not a traditional fund. They may put debt funding in as well. So they may have equity fund, debt fund. But as you say, you put your money into the new company, you set it out with them for 3 to 5 years, and then you sell again. And that'll either be a float. So tech businesses, they may float it, put it on the big market. It may be another sale to trade, because that's where they want to be. Because all this is already planned by the PE fund. Or it'll be another PE fund, a bigger one, with more experience, because that fund's only up to a certain size. They may then send it up to the next one. And go on and on and on and on. And it just depends how well you perform, how many bites of the cherry you get.
We did a deal not too long ago with you guys, and when we exited, it came to light that we could have potentially insured against the warranties and the indemnities. And that wasn't something we thought about in the process. Is that something you can plan for? Warranty
and indemnity insurance is a really complex area, and it's really expensive as well. So about 1% of the value that you want to insure. It's also useless for the seller because, like with all insurance policies, the whole point of warranty insurance policies is understanding. So you give warranties in a share deal to the best of your knowledge normally. Okay. If you are going to an insurer to say, can you insure me for £10 million on a potential claim because I don't want to answer this warranty, the insurer's going to say get stuffed, and they get put a load of exclusions in there to say, well, if you haven't done this, then we're not going to pay out. Okay. So the alternative is you ask the buyer to go get the insurance policy, and then that comes out of your purchase price. So depending on the size of the transaction, that can be a substantial amount. And even so, the buyer needs some convincing. So I've had a couple of deals where, one typical example, so it was a BMW dealership not too far from here. I was involved for a while in the business. The husband died, and then the wife died, and they were the sole shareholders of the company. Children, all the money went into trust. Children weren't involved in the business. You had a guy that's still a client of mine who was the FD, who was now all of a sudden turned into dealer principal, and he had to sell this on behalf of the family. He had no idea what was going on. Anyway, another dealership, buyer comes along, and that was funded. The warranty indemnity insurance was key to it because literally no one had a clue. But when you've got an owner that's been sunning himself on the beach for 2 years and letting his management team get away with whatever and says, you know what, I don't know, and I can't be asked finding out, it's not going to work. So there has to be really specific circumstances, but otherwise, like you say, everyone would be doing it. And it's an expense, and really, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've not had a warranty claim yet. If you do the process right, if you give all the information, you answer everything the right way, you spend the time and the effort, you're fine. I had one. It was a tax indemnity claim recently because someone overclaimed the R&D. But that's straightforward. It's 30k. Relief was lost. They paid the 30k over. But the thing to really have in your mind on sale deals is warranty, indemnity insurance, and all the warranties. It's not litigious. It's not like we're in America. Yeah, they've come up with a price of 20 million quid for your business based on these facts. If those facts are wrong and it costs us something to make right, there's a hole in the accounts because this is what it is. I want to adjust the price and get it back to where it should have been. That's all it's doing. It's not about risk. It's just they got the price wrong. So warranties and indemnities are a post-completion price adjustment mechanism. Got to keep that in mind when doing it, and it just makes sure that people do the job properly instead of just chucking everything in the data room and hoping it's all fine. Do the process. You'll sleep at night.
Are there any time limitations on your indemnities and things like that? So if someone's coming selling the business and there's the risk that
Yep. We'll get into
£1,000
technical stuff.
or
Yeah.
whatever the number might be, and then obviously they're thinking about with their IFA, how much money do I need for the rest of my life? What can I give away?
Yeah.
But they might have in the back of their mind, there is the risk that I could be on the hook for a couple of £100,000 if that comes to light and something goes wrong or whatever. Is there generally like a time limitation on that?
It's part of the negotiating a share sale is it's all about managing risk. Okay, so we will go through, if we're selling, we'll be looking through stuff and making sure that buyers can flag everything and say, well, this is a problem. Either fix it now and we'll chip the price, or we'll chip the price and we'll fix it afterwards. But let's say there is this big tax liability, which is the common risk, is a tax liability. Warranties under an SPA, you're probably looking at general warranties, non-tax. You're looking at about 18 months on average. 18 months, why? Audit. You do a deal, it takes about 18 months to get your accounts done. If you're going to find the hole in the accounts, it takes about 18 months. So that's why we say 18 months for a warranty deal, for warranties. Indemnities will be longer, but indemnities are more finite. We know there is a high risk of this happening, and it's probably going to happen in a short period of time. Therefore, it's going to be dealt with as an indemnity. I will never get indemnity unless it's absolutely certain. And if it is absolutely certain, I would probably say, look, instead of having a sleepless night and worry about costs, just give them the money off. Just say we think it's 50 grand, we'll take 50 grand off the price. Easy. That's what it's doing. We're adjusting the price by the information we're getting. Tax is a different question. Okay, 6 years. So the tax deed looks back 6 years because that's how long the revenue can go. We actually say 7 years. Again, financial years don't tie into annual years from the deal. So we normally say tax deeds, they can bring a claim anytime up to 7 years after the deal, and it's a moving window. If there's fraud involved, it's 21 limitations on there. So you got there. No one's coming to me to sell their company if they've been fraudulent. You'd be stupid to go to your lawyer and do that, wouldn't you? Right? So most businesses at this stage are clean, nice, packaged, ready to go. Okay. But that's the point. People aren't selling dirty businesses. They're not coming to lawyers and doing it. So most of this stuff is okay. They'll know where the skeletons are. If you've taken your time and done your education and looked at things and tidied things up as you go, you'll know what you're walking into. And most of it's manageable. And as I said, all it is a price. If you've got to take a chip and the price ain't right, don't do the deal. Go away, fix it, come back to market. It's not worth not sleeping for. Trust me. At the back.
Just going back to pre-sale planning, I think it's really important to focus on the interaction between the question of valuation and potential buyers. So when your advisors are doing the research on the potential trade buyers and giving you advice on valuation, I think it's really important to remember that valuation is not one figure set in stone. Its beauty is in the eye of the beholder. A trade buyer who has more to benefit by bolting your business onto theirs, all other things being equal, would pay more.
Pay a premium, absolutely. Yeah.
And therefore, it's a bespoke approach, focusing on the needs and the angle of each good quality potential trade buyer.
People don't think about it. They really don't think about it until the actual time the number lands on a piece of paper in front of them.
They go down the golf club and somebody says, I've just sold my business for 8 times, and
Yeah.
Think of it as a bespoke valuation relative to each potential buyer.
Cool.
I have a question. What if I have like property in another country and I've inherited that? Now, being a single child, my parents passed away and during the COVID. So now I've got like let's say about 2 million. So how do I manage that? Do I bring it here, and is there something which I want to pass on to my son? And how would I manage all this? Are there rules?
So the property you've inherited is abroad?
Yes.
Yeah, so it would depend on the tax structure there, the tax structure here. So you being domiciled here, I'm assuming, then you would be taxed on your worldwide assets here. If there's also taxation to pay where the property is, then there may be a double taxation treaty to claim some of that tax back. But we would certainly be able to go through the options with you and look at some estate planning to sort of draft your will, or, we would tend to say we can draft your will here that would cover worldwide assets, but we would always advise you to go to a solicitor in the jurisdiction where you have property and draft a specific will for the assets there, because we can't guarantee what the actual succession laws are in that particular jurisdiction and whether our will here would be valid there. So that's the best advice, really. Seek advice in that jurisdiction and have a separate will in the two.
So it's separate because I want to keep the property, it's my heritage, right? So
Yeah.
I don't want to sell it off.
No.
Maybe some of it.
Yeah.
And some of it I've written. So I have to look at laws of both
Yes.
countries and make 2 separate wills.
Yes, that would be the best advice. But we would be happy to meet with you and look at it all and give you some further advice.
Anyone else? There's a lot of questions today. Don't really get this many questions. Don't do that many presentations, so something like that. Well, we're going to be hanging around. There's plenty of breakfast left to be eaten. Otherwise, I'm going to take it upstairs and my Garrett's will eat all of it anyway. But yeah, help yourself, have a coffee, hang around, have a chat.
And please complete the feedback
Yes,
forms as well for
please.
future topics, or drop us an email if there's a specific topic you want us to look at in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.